Once again, my name is Ashley Lorenz. I'm with the Diversity Leadership Council. Welcome to lunch and the keynote session. So excited to have Maria Hinojosa here as our lunch keynote. Who got a chance to attend the plenary session this morning with Kevin Sowers and Renita Arrington-Sanders? Wasn't that great? So Kevin actually called me out this morning. I had described this event as free, right? And I mentioned that it had sold out, but it was free. And he said, nothing's free, and I agree with that. And so really the price of admission here is that we're really hoping you'll learn something today that you will take back to your division, to your day job, and put into practice. And so in walking the talk, I did attend the first workshop session, and one of them was on inciting revolution through the power of women's anger. All right, so I actually learned quite a bit there. But there was this one piece where the moderator, who's excellent, said, there's a difference between debate, discussion, and dialogue. In debate, you're kind of, you're debating a point. In discussion, you're trying to resolve an issue. And dialogue is more open-ended. So what I'm going to take back is to be more intentional about what kind of conversation we're having. As my wife will tell you, I tend to gravitate towards that first one. But, obviously today is all about dialogue. So, just some quick shout-outs once again. I have to acknowledge the workshop presenters, and really you guys make this conference what it is. So raise your hand if you're a workshop presenter. All right, thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. And again, acknowledgments to the Diversity Leadership Council, whose thought leadership is essential in setting the program and choosing the workshops. And of course, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion that really administers the events of the Diversity Leadership Council and many more. So particularly Erin Gleason and Amber Moreland, who's getting ready to leave us soon. So really appreciate your effort. All right, and with that, to bring up our speaker, I'd like to bring up President Ron Daniels.
Thank you, Ashley. Good afternoon, everyone. Really pleased to be here, and of course, exceptionally grateful to the DLC and its leadership, of course, including Ashley, whose work has made Johns Hopkins University stronger, more welcoming, more equitable place through all our efforts, notably this conference, which is in its 16th year. I think that deserves a round of applause. Before we get deep in this session, I want to just take a moment to talk about Elijah. And want to join the chorus of voices today who have marked the loss of an exceptional leader and dear friend to our university, indeed our city, state, and country, Congressman Elijah Cummings. His passing is truly a blow to us. One that I know is reverberating through so many of you, students, faculty, staff, who have powerfully and poignantly shared your stories and notes and posts and conversations over the last 24 hours. Because it was indeed the magic of Elijah Cummings to make us all feel like friends and partners in a common enterprise. And I think we've been mourning his passing very much in that spirit. As I shared this morning in my message to our entire community, Congressman Cummings was a singular voice for justice and a fierce advocate for those whose voices he knew must be heard for our city and our nation to deliver on its incredible promise. A leader who held all of us, myself very much included, to the highest of standards, and a counselor of a kind heart and a towering wisdom who confronted us with our failings, with our stumbles, but who ultimately expressed confidence, love, and support for us to do better, to realize our potential, to be better. He will be profoundly missed, and yet his life and legacy, I think, can be a lodestar for us all. And indeed, I think we gather in that spirit today. So I'd ask you just to take a moment, and if we could all stand and just think about Elijah and what he wanted from us, for our country, for our city, and to mark his passing and his incredible contributions to us all. Thank you. Almost 50 years ago, in 1970, a call went out. The summons was for the first sizable cohort of black students at Johns Hopkins to gather on the steps of Shriver Hall, just a stone's throw from here, for a picture. That picture, which is up there, and it's on the side there. The image is truly inspiring. And as you might imagine, it is also a time capsule of the era's fashion. In fact, only one participant is wearing a necktie. And he, of course, was the lone administrator in the group. A man named Ron Owens, then the Assistant Director of Admissions for Johns Hopkins. Now, despite his challenge sartorial choices, I think of the time they would have said square, Ron Owens held a special place in the heart of students. Indeed, he was the one who brought everyone together that day for that picture. But it was not Ron's first call to action. When Ron came to Hopkins in the late 1960s, he mounted a mission on behalf of the university to recruit more black students. Indeed, in an interview with our student paper, the newsletter, in February 1970, he shared a simple theory for why black students hadn't been applying to Johns Hopkins. And of course, if they don't apply, they don't enroll and they don't participate in the life of this community. His insight, he thought that the students were of the view that the institution just wasn't interested in them, didn't care about them. Owen set out to change that and to show, as he put it, that we were interested in them, interested in their membership in this community, interested in their flourishing. As part of his broad efforts, he enlisted current students, ones he had recruited, championed, mentored, and counseled, including BSU founder and SGA president John Guess, to travel the country and to speak to high school students about Hopkins and to raise the profile of the university. And that effort bore very clear fruit. Applications from black students that year tripled for the incoming class. Now, I recently heard former student stories of Ron Owens' deep connections to and care for them, and they brought home to me yet again how much the cause of advancing diversity is not just about articulating lofty ideas, but in truth mustering the institutional and individual commitment to deliver upon those ideals. To convey by our goals and our actions our shared belief that we are interested deeply and profoundly in welcoming excellent scholars, students, and staff of diverse backgrounds, experiences, abilities, identities, races, and ethnicities into our community, and to see that diversity as a very strength of this place. Now, we know that progress did not and continues to not come easily. Success requires a collective, a commanding effort. It requires intentionality. It demands commitment from leadership, goal setting, and public accountability. It also requires the close work that occurs in offices, in labs, in classrooms, in student advising, financial aid and HR, and through organizations like our Diversity Leadership Council. And it is found in the sweep of initiatives like our roadmap and data collection efforts that have shaped the Faculty Diversity Initiative and the faculty diversity efforts now in the works. And it is also found in the daily acts of mentorship, friendship, and collegiality that allow us to create the community and the institution that we all wish to see and of which we can all be proud. And the work of the DLC in contributing to this efforts is abundantly clear as you help us not only to imagine better, but to hold us accountable for actually doing better. And here in just that move from not just seeing, but doing better, I hear the echoes of Elijah Cummings' thunderous voice imploring us to do just that. Now, there are a number of ways that we're doing better, but I'll call out one that I know was very much on the mind of Ron Owens and all those alumni in the photograph 50 years ago. The steady march towards recruiting and retaining a more diverse and excellent cadre of undergraduate students at Johns Hopkins. That was really important then, and it's really important now. And here, although we still have lots of work to do on other dimensions of our diversity roadmap, the one place where I feel the transformation has really been profound and palpable is with respect to what has happened with our undergraduate student body. So I'll start off and just remind everyone that this year we recruited the second most talented class in the entire country. So we're now tied with MIT, Harvard, Yale, and Columbia for the second most talented class if you just look at GPA, ACT, SAT scores. And remarkably, and not entirely surprisingly, we also have the most diverse class ever in the institution's history. So here's something that's really striking. And for those of you on this campus, you'll know it to be the case. But for those of you who are on other campuses in East Baltimore or at APL, it may not be as evident. But today, 2/3 of the entering class is actually minority students. This is a majority minority school. It's now basically 22% of our student body is characterized as white. The remainder are minority students. And again, we know that's a broad category. It's Asian, it's Pacific Islanders, it's Latinx, and it's African Americans and indigenous students. But it is but remarkably, it is this constellation of minorities that makes up the majority of students in our undergraduate population. But here, even more significantly, we were about 6%, 5 to 6% of our undergraduate student body a decade ago was African American, and this year it's 13.6%. We've gone from being a place where we were kind of at the low third of our peer group in terms of our African American participation. We're at the very apex of it for our African American students and for our Latinx students. And that's just, again, a sign of the progress I think that's possible in so many other areas of our university's life. There's, of course, lots more to do. And it's days like today that provide not only the tools and skills, but the inspiration that keeps us moving forward. Now, no small part of this inspiration insight will come from the afternoon's keynote speaker, an award-winning journalist and broadcaster who understands so well the impact of showing interest in those who have been historically overlooked or made to feel invisible and marginalized in our society, Maria Hinojosa. Maria's father was an immigrant who, after training in his native Mexico and completing a fellowship at Johns Hopkins, again, we couldn't let this moment pass without noting the key and defining moments in your family's life. So there is a nice Hopkins connection here. Went on to have a stellar academic career as a leading inner ear surgeon at the University of Chicago. He was also an avowed news junkie, obsessed with every program and media outlet, from the press to Time magazine. And watching alongside her father inspired Maria's own love of journalism. But she also was keenly aware that the reporters that she and her father revered never covered people like her and her family. As she has said, this silence left her feeling invisible, as if her story didn't matter. So Maria decided to do her part in correcting this oversight and in her own way to take interest. As a reporter, Maria has dedicated herself to finding and telling the stories of those who have too often been left out of the mainstream of national narratives, and to ensuring that there's a voice for those who often go unheard. As the first Latinx woman in many newsrooms, Maria has both broken stories and broken new ground, pioneering news programs like Peabody Award-winning Latino USA and America by the Numbers, and amassing award upon award, including a total of 4 Emmys. I think that deserves applause. Clearly, there's no better person to share some thoughts about the importance of expressing, as Ron Owens did, interest, and making the invisible visible. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Maria Hinojosa.
Well, thank you, President. You stole half of my speech, so why didn't you guys tell me you were going to talk about my dad? It'd be like, oh, Dad gone. Wow, that was really beautiful, and and thank you so much for the spiritual movement for Elijah Cummings. I live in Harlem, and so yeah, we are feeling your pain. He was such an important soul, and coming to Johns Hopkins. So yes, it is my first time ever giving a speech at Johns Hopkins. So I just feel like, whoa, yes, Dad is present. May he rest in peace. But it feels a little bit like coming home because I wasn't around when my mom and dad and my brother and sister did the fellowship here. So I just heard stories about Hopkins. Y cuando estábamos en Johns Hopkins, y Baltimore, y Baltimore. So, you got that, Baltimore? It's really quite special to be here. And by the way, I didn't realize what the talented class is here at Johns Hopkins. I am a professor at Barnard, so we beat all of you anyway, but because we're women. But anyway, I will just drop that my daughter goes to Brown. And my speeches, as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a performer. So I tell this little joke. I wasn't planning on doing this since the president talked about your talented class. So my daughter, I'm being facetious, okay, so my daughter goes to a super fabulous private school in Manhattan called the Bank Street School for Progressive Education, and from there she gets into the 2 top schools, private schools in New York, Dalton and Fieldston, and from there, can you guys lower the lights? Okay, I see the lights are to make me look young. Okay, keep the lights on then. All right, keep the lights on. All right, anyway, let me not get sidetracked. So she gets into Fieldston and Dalton, and she chooses Fieldston. Dalton was shocked. And from there, she gets into Brown, which is no small feat. And from there, she gets into the most competitive team at Brown. Which team is it? Somebody call out a name of a team or club that's like the most competitive at Brown. Dagger skating? Interesting. Who else? Huh? No, but good. No. She is the captain of the only Ivy League pole dancing team. Mom, I didn't get into the Latin dance company, but I'm on the pole dancing team freshman year. And I'm like, and I tell you that story because I wasn't planning on telling you, and she'd be like, please, Mom. But, part of what we're talking about here is opening up our minds to change and diversity and progressing and moving and being with the times. And so, yes, I have taken pole dancing classes with my daughter. Which maybe is a good connection to the conversation you guys had earlier today about anger and women. Getting on that pole takes out a lot of anger. I actually meditate and I box, which is kind of crazy, right? Because it's like the 2 opposite things, but that's how I deal with my anger. And And this morning, because I was feeling a little angry because of some things that are happening not too far from here, i.e. in the capital of the United States of America, the capital of the world's greatest democracy. Is it? Is it? So I did a lot of yoga this morning, and I meditated, and I had my meditative music on, because I was trying to take care of myself and to not let the rage take over. And then also, I wasn't planning on telling you this story, but then I got into my car to get driven over here. And it was a very interesting conversation. I mean, the thing is that he didn't help me with my bag. And I am wearing 6-inch heels, because otherwise I'm very short. So I was a little bit like, why you gotta be rude? So, okay, straight up, I'm just gonna tell you what happened, just because when. So then I was just like, so he was an older white man, like maybe 70. And I was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I was like, just ask him the question. No, don't do it, don't, just ask him the question. Sir, can I ask you a question? Yes. Who did you vote for? And he said, when? In the midterms or? Oh, no, sir, for president, for Trump. So how are you feeling about things? I'm feeling great. I'm feeling great. Economy is growing. I'm in a better situation. Less unemployment. Look at the stock market. I'm feeling great. Okay, and so we kind of talked a little bit about it. And then I said, so when you hear this stuff that's being talked about, you know, kind of like in one, that's a bunch of BS. Okay. And then I said, sir, can I ask you, when you hear the conversation about kind of like diversity and representation and, you know, the need for us to be a more kind of open country of all kinds of diversity, you know, depending on your religion or your race or your sexual identity, you know, when you hear that conversation, what do you hear? Doesn't really matter much to me at all. Doesn't matter much. And I said, does that mean that it sounds like BS to you? Yeah, I think that's about right. So then we got dropped off, and you know, I was like you guys stay in the car to finish an NPR story, and you can't get out of the car. I couldn't finish the conversation with him, but I did just tell him that, you know, I was Mexican and that I was not born in this country, and that people like me right now are being targeted. And I share this with you because that's part of what we have to do at the same time that I'm owning that moment in the conversation and making myself a little uncomfortable. You know, I also understand that there's only so much work there that I can do, and that frankly, those of you who can have those conversations within your own families need to have those conversations. And they have to start from a place of humanity. I was a little straight up, like, yo, you didn't carry my bag, so I'm just gonna straight up ask you, who'd you vote for? Normally, I would have been like, so, how you doing? What the, you know, I would have been a little bit nicer, but he didn't carry my bag, so. But the point is that part of the work that we have to do is to engage in these conversations, right? And it is about getting a little uncomfortable. So now to my speech. Whoops, I just ate a few minutes out of the speech. Okay, so I want to say thank you for, it's the LDC, right? DLC. For not giving up for your 16 years and for being so forward-thinking and representative about this conversation, which impacts not only here, but of course, as you know, reverberates, because Hopkins is a very powerful institution. And you know, I have been giving lectures about, what is it, you know, multiculturalism or diversity or, you know, all of these different terms, inclusion, equity, representation. Like, for the entirety of my professional career, I've been talking about this. And I've talked about it and pitched it from so many levels, right? From the business imperative, the consumer imperative, the justice imperative, the values imperative, the fun imperative, laughter, You know, because imagine if all of the headlines that we were reading, have been reading about diversity and demographic change, were like headlines that said, oh my God, more POC coming to the United States. It's gonna be a party, better food, better dancing. We're gonna have a great time. We're gonna learn about it. Man, it's gonna be, like imagine if the headlines had been that as opposed to looming demographic change coming under a cloud of darkness. It's happening. What might have happened, right? But the truth is that our country has been, since its core, right, really at odds with what is happening with our country. And we have to recognize it. And you guys are super smart, and you know our history. It's complicated, right? It's very complicated. But for me, you know, when I think about why I've been doing this, and to be honest with you, there are days when I wake up and I'm like, ¿pa qué? Like, why'd I do this all for, man? Like, why'd I do this all for? Like, look where we are. Look where we are today. So it was all to avoid, the conversation around diversity was all about, I'm just checking my time because I'm like, okay. Well, you guys will wrap me. Okay, just give me the 5-minute cue before I have to wrap. Oh, yes, I love you. Thank you so much. All of it was done basically to avoid where we have gotten now in the most extreme version, which is the total dehumanization. And by the way, this dehumanization is centered anti-indigenous, yes, but anti-black, right? So it is centered where we are, the level of inhumanity and dehumanization that we are all living today is centered on the experience of anti-blackness in this country. Now, at the same time, I was also always talking about there's nothing to be afraid of, people, nothing to be afraid of, you know, because there was all of this undertone of fear of what was happening. I was like, no tengan miedo. But you know what? I also get it. Like, for someone like me who represents change in my entire body, I also, you know, I don't really like change. So, like, for example, we have been living in Harlem for decades upon decades, and maybe about a decade ago when the clear gentrification was happening and my daughter and I were walking down the same one who's on the pole dancing team, we were walking down the street. She's super smart because I said to her, I was looking at all the luxury condominiums that were popping up in my street in Harlem, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, this is a problem. And she said, Mom, you always say that change is good. This is change that's happening here. And I was like, yes, Mama, change, yes, is good, but you know what? Can we have some social justice with the change? Can we get some social justice with the change? So go ahead and build the luxury condominiums, 30% of them for people from the community. Why is that so hard? Why is that so hard? That's the values proposition of it, right? Because the thing is that you all understand that whenever we leave people behind, it always comes back to get us. It's like, and I love this line, it's like in a family. Like when you leave that, whoever person, the crazy uncle, etc., somehow you're gonna have to deal with that argument, that unresolved, the forgiveness and resolution of it, you know? And the thing is that in this country, like I can't believe when I was writing this, but I wrote it with my hands. So I'm gonna read it. It says, the thing about this country is that we are family. Oh my God, I was like, that's such a beautiful sentence. You know, but it's like, that's how we, like in our tenderness, it's like, that's why you're doing this, right? It's not like you're doing it because of that. And it's okay to touch into that, to that deep emotion that we feel. I really feel like Elijah Cummings touched into that, right? That we are family. And you know what? We all just want to be a part of this, right? So when you hear those protesters saying, you will not replace us, it's like, you dummies. We don't want to replace you, fools. We want to hang out with you. We want to party with you. I mean, I'm talking as like a Mexican immigrant, you know, like you know, that's the image of like, vamos con los americanos. Let's learn from them, you know. Like we want to party with you, hang out with you, work with you, maybe marry you, fall in love with you, but replace you? That's crazy. But the impact, that's their trauma, right? You know, but if you talk about the impact of being invisible, you know, I think about one of my earliest memories around trauma, actually, and I didn't used to think about it in this way, but I remember it was in the late 1960s, and George Wallace was running for president, and George Wallace was a Democrat and a racist. And my little Jewish girlfriend and I, because I grew up on the south side of Chicago in Hyde Park, hello, he did end up going to the University of Chicago. My dad, I mean, so that's why we ended up there. You lost your opportunity, but anyway. So I'm going home, and my Jewish best friend and I are figuring out which basement we're gonna hide in if George Wallace gets elected, because we knew that he wanted to get rid of people like us. So the impact of that kind of trauma and invisibility is real, right? It's in your skin, it's in your blood. It gets embedded into us, into our brains and our psyche. You guys know this. You guys have like an amazing neuroscience department here. I know this. So, yeah, talking about it is actually part of what we do to process this. I mean, that's how I do. I tell all these stories to you and then through my media. And so I'm going to tell you the two different stories of my parents' arrival. So when my dad comes, and I actually think, I don't remember if he was, I think he was coming to Chicago by bus first. That was the first interview that he did. And so he takes the bus from Mexico City to Chicago. So they had to cross over the border. And he gets in the bus in the United States, and the first bus stop that they get at is in Texas, and he goes to use the washroom, and he's presented with the horror of this country that he never had imagined, which was, I want to go to the bathroom. Why can't I go to the bathroom? Because I have to decide if I'm white or if I'm colored. And my father was like, ¿Qué es esto? What is this in this country? And so he had to, like, no, I'm not white. But am I that? And so he chose privilege, and he said, I think I can get by. And I think that sense of I'm just kind of squeezing in or getting by always stuck with him. And I think this notion of, can I trust this country, or will there be a day when it says, Mexican, colored, white? He was a little bit distrustful, which was hard to grow up with, right? My mom's story, I'm going to tell you my mom's story the way I've told my mom's story for about 20 years until I changed it last year. But I'm going to tell you the way I usually tell it, which is that, so my mom is coming with the four of us. I'm the youngest of four. I'm a baby in arms, and she's flying from Mexico City, changing planes in Dallas, then Dallas to Chicago. And she's all dressed up, wearing her, petticoat skirt and her kitten heels, and 4 kids under the age of 7. Are you kidding? On a plane for the first time? Oh my God. And so she gets to the Dallas airport, and she's just like, fabulous with her green cards, because we did get our green cards through the University of Chicago. And if there's anybody from Texas, please excuse me, I'm about to imitate a Texas accent. And so the immigration agent gets the green cards and is looking at us very intently. He's studying the 4 kids and my mother. And he says, now ma'am, he's very, very tall, very tall. Ma'am, I do see that everything is in order here with your papers. You do have your green cards all in order. This is very good news. You will be able to come to the United States. The only problem is I'm just going to have to keep the little baby girl because she's got a little bit of a rash. We're going to put her into quarantine. And my mom said, And the way I've told this story is that this voice that came out of her belly, and she's petite like me, and she wasn't wearing 6-inch heels, only kitten heels. So, this voice comes out, and it's like it wrapped itself around his bicep, not really, but it was like, and she said, sir, my name is Berta Hinojosa, and my husband is Dr. Raul Hinojosa, and you can call the president of the University of Chicago because he was invited to come to this country. Sir, do you understand that? I'm coming into this country with my 4 children. Sir, do you understand that? Sir, sir. He said, yes, ma'am, I do. Come on in. And that's the way it goes, right? Is that everybody applauds. So now I can cut out this part of the speech because the president said it. So yeah, grew up watching Meet the Press, all of these things, 60 Minutes, and we were invisible. We were consuming it all. Okay, I did add this part about, because I wanted to let you know that I did want to be an actress, and when I auditioned, some man who I didn't even know who he was, but he was a white man who I assumed had power, told me that he didn't really get me in the audition, and poof, my dream went away, and I put that in because, you know, there is a sense of also people's awareness. And that's part of the thing that I'm asking you to do. Yet you have to be aware, for those of you who have power and for those of you who are white men and white women, that you are aware that it is, in fact, very important that you be hyper aware of how you act and what you say. Because it can feel extremely exhausting. Like you may say, well, that's really tiring to be hyper aware. And I wrote, it's really exhausting to be invisible. And this is a shout out to my LGBTQ community and specifically my trans, non-binary, gender fluid people, because they continue to teach us all, and I feel I am a student, about the core of humanity and how we see each other. So I have been blessed with many people who are in different forms of transition. And so this is a very active conversation over the last 7 years of my life. And you know, I was talking to an African-American makeup lady who was making up my face to go on camera on MSNBC, and she's a young black woman, and she just said, I don't understand they. I don't get they as a concept. And I was like, I know it's hard, but if you can understand that when someone wants to identify as they, it means they're not one thing or the other. That in fact, they are not either one, right? And so, can you imagine, I said, if I, in an act of solidarity, said I wanted you to call me, use the pronoun they, because I wanted you to think that maybe I'm not one thing or the other, but that I am the other. And she was like, okay, I think I can work with that. And then, of course, I said, watch Billions and watch Pose. You know, because part of what we're learning from the trans community is to see us for who we are and to allow to not have to be boxed in. And by the way, we all make mistakes. So with my trans family, when I make a mistake around gender, you know what I do? I say, I'm sorry. Hello? I'm sorry. I'm sorry I did that again. I'm sorry, because also people who are transitioning understand that it is a transition, but it is an acknowledgement of humility. Right? And humility right now is really important. I put here, humility commercial time. This is the commercial time for humility, right? I tell my students, who are mostly students of color, oh, because I'm Mexican, so I have 16 jobs. So, so one of them is that I'm a professor at Barnard, previously at DePaul University. And so I tell my students, you know, that they need to walk like this. That this is how they have to walk through the campus, that they need to be walking with their shoulders back, like we gotta own it all over the place, all the time, because we actually have to do that because we are being pushed down, let's say, from the highest peaks of power in this country, maybe that would be the president. And so, you know, I have to tell them to believe in themselves, and I talk them up, and at the same time, also to own their humility. And I'm asking you to do the same. And humility does not equal powerlessness, right? It doesn't equal powerlessness. It actually recognizes that you have power, and you're going to do something with that power by eating it a little bit. And so, yeah, I'm going to take a moment to talk about white supremacy because we have to. Because talking about white supremacy is something that is uncomfortable for everybody, but it is also really important that we understand that having this conversation is not a personal thing. And I do agree with my students who say this is work that needs to be done, frankly, by white folks. So those of you who are in this room, this is actually, yes, to do this work with love and tenderness in your own families, to try to humanize, because this is what they are afraid of. And it's like, yo, why are you afraid of this, man? And so it is uncomfortable to have these conversations, but it's uncomfortable to live under white supremacy and not be able to label it. And so, you know, I like, for example, I don't like to say this, and whenever I say this, I give a big, like, okay, I'm about to say something that's gonna make you uncomfortable, because I also think that's okay to just cue people that I'm about to say something that's gonna be like, whoa. But if you understand that the history has been written from a perspective of white men, with all love and respect, because yes, they are my best friends and they are my employees and I work with them. But who, especially as we just commemorated Indigenous Peoples Day, and I do not use this term, but you understand if people were to say, well, the Pilgrims were the very first illegal aliens. They didn't have permission. They didn't have papers. And I recently gave a lecture at pharmaceutical. It was very surprising. I said, but they did bring disease. We don't like it. You're all uncomfortable. You're like, oh my God, this is terrible. I know. I'm sorry. I don't like to do this. But at the same time, it's okay. We have to talk about these things. And it doesn't mean that we have to be afraid. So, quick story also about stories, right? And how we have to, at every moment, engage in these conversations. So, for example, I ended up in Omaha, Nebraska. You guys are going to think that all I do is talk to drivers. Well, you know, yes. And also people everywhere. So I was in Omaha, same situation, white guy, early 50s, and he was very, so we had a lot of rapport, and then I was like, hey, can I ask you a personal question? He was like, sure, which I find very interesting that they say yes. Like very open. So I was like, so who'd you vote? Well, I voted for Trump. And I said, and this was like 18 months ago. So I was like, so how are you, maybe, I guess a year. Yeah, maybe 18. How are you feeling? Well, I wish he'd stop tweeting, but I really believe in that wall. And I said, oh, okay, why? And he said, well, because we need to keep out the drug dealers and the gangbangers. And I said, okay, well, you live in Omaha, Nebraska. You've got a very large Latino population here. He said, yeah, they have the best Mexican food, really nice neighborhood. I said, so do you see the drug dealers and gangbangers there? And he said, no, actually. So what are you trying to keep out? He was like, whoa, that was a trick question, right? And then he says, listen, okay, well, you know what? I really believe in that Muslim ban. And I was like, well, why? And he said, well, because you've got to keep out the terrorists. And I said, okay, but you live in Omaha. There is a large Muslim community here in Omaha. Yeah, my neighbor's Muslim, such a nice guy. And I said, so do you see the terrorists? No. He said, the trick questions you're asking me. And I said, really? And then he did the self-reflection. He said, oh, I understand. What you're saying is really what I need to do is I just need to open my eyes. I just need to open my eyes. I just need to actually see the people who are around me. And we all need to be doing that now increasingly, because you know what, the level of inhumanity that we are facing now means that every one of us, when I say, why did I do it? It's because every little grain of sand right now, you guys, we have to save each other, along with the country. But seriously. Now, I'm going to tell another story about a driver. This one was different, though. Now, sometimes, like when I left the Omaha driver, he was like, wow, you're so interesting. Where are you from? I said, me, I'm Mexican. See ya. So I don't often identify myself, but some people know me as a journalist, so I have to be very careful, because if you know me as a journalist, then I have to be careful about how I'm speaking, right? Because, but oftentimes it will just be a complete off the record, like they don't know who I am. And this is the case that happened before the election, when Trump was running, and I was going to Athens, Georgia, and the driver was a black man. And same thing. So I'm asking people all the time now, by the way. Like, I'm asking people, like, right now, who would you vote for? Like, who's your best ticket, right? Like, these are questions that I ask people all the time, like when I'm on the line for the bagels or this. So who do you think of that? In the gym, I just do this. So I asked this man, it was 2015, I said, who you like? And he said, I like Trump. And I said, why? And he said all of these things about Trump. He was a good businessman. I mean, really. Okay, I didn't laugh like that. I didn't. I was like, okay, good business. I mean, that rap on Trump, rags to rich, that whole thing. And I listened. And then I said, I really that's why I'm sharing this, because I went, okay, I'm going to take off. I'm not a journalist. And I said, sir, I have to be very honest with you. This is heartbreaking to hear you. You look like the man who was my hero. You look like the man who was the first person in this country to make me feel visible. He looked like you. It was Martin Luther King. He was alive when I was a little girl. And so you saying this, I said, sir, it's like a wooden stake in my heart. I don't understand. And he saw me getting emotional, because as you can tell, I get emotional. And I don't have a problem with I'm all about, it's okay. It's okay. No, this is real. So and I just said, you understand why? And when I told him the personal story, that's when he was like, oh, sister. Thank you. And he listened. And so actually, this is a call to my African American brothers and sisters. We need that communication happening right now between us. I am going to tell you a conversation that I heard was being had in the newsroom of The Root, which is a black news website through NBC, and they are having a conversation as to whether or not black men and women have it worse than immigrants right now, because immigrants are being disappeared all the time. And so we're not going to get into Oppression Olympics. We're not going to do that. But we have to see what's happening around us, right? We have to see each other's humanity, right? We have to understand that right now, Latinx are the ones that have the fastest growing rate of being put behind bars. Why? Because it's jail, prison, and immigration. And Latinx includes Afro-Latinx, and the immigrants who are being put behind those bars are African and Black Caribbean. So this is a conversation where we need to see each other. And that is the good. There is a saying in Spanish, there is no bad from which good cannot come, no hay mal que por bien no venga. And so this is the good, right? Is that we are able to see each other more clearly. Wow, a lot of this speech went away. It was a good speech, though. No, I really enjoyed, and you got the feel of it. They were just, this is a very important issue to me, and I'm so honored to have been able to spend some time with you. And I just want to end, throughout my career, I'm so thankful that you asked me to come here. I feel so honored, really, because it is true, you guys. The president spoke the truth. I mean, Johns Hopkins, it's like, mis respetos, you guys are super smart. It's true. Everybody knows that. And so it is a true honor to be asked to speak to you about this. But for the entirety of my career, what I was hearing mostly from my white male colleagues and female colleagues was, Maria, you're just a little bit too immigrant-y. You're a little bit too feminist-y, a little bit too woman-y, and it's like, you got an agenda. You have a little bit of an agenda. And I was like, and as a journalist, as journalists, we have this core, which is like, we have an ethical core about us. Well, many of us. And so I really felt so challenged by the fact that I was being told I had an agenda. And now I run my own nonprofit media company, and if you want to learn more, come and speak to me. I created my own thing, and so there we do not use certain words because I'm the boss. So we don't use the term illegal to refer to a human being, and we don't use the word minority. So with all due respect to the president, I don't use the term minority because minority is a disempowering word. It makes us understand that something is happening, that now white America is going to become a minority, and oh my God, that's terrible! So we need to reframe the conversation. But I was being told, that I was too biased. And I spent so much of my career feeling confused about this. I now know that actually, like Frederick Douglass, like Ida B. Wells, my North Stars, African American journalists, right, that actually they have been reporting, they were looking at the canaries in the mine that were dying. And they were saying, we have to report about this, we have to talk about this. And other American journalists were saying, you have an agenda, Mr. Frederick Douglass. That's un-American. And you, Ida B. Wells, you have an agenda that's un-American. What I was bringing, all of that particularity that I was bringing into the newsroom was making me a better journalist, not a worse one. And yet, because of the power shift, I was always made to see otherwise. So the person who told me to never use the term illegal looked nothing like me. His name was Elie Wiesel. He survived the Holocaust. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. You know of him. And I met him in the CNN newsroom, and I ran up to him, and I was like, what should I ever, CNN wants me to use, and I don't know, it doesn't feel right. And he was the one who said, the first thing the Nazis did was to declare the Jews to be an illegal people. They were an illegal people. And he said, there is no such thing as an illegal person. And you probably have used the term illegal immigrant in your lives, maybe even in your writings, no longer, because it's grammatically incorrect, and Johns Hopkins wants to be grammatically correct. It's grammatically incorrect. So being an illegal immigrant is like being an illegal bike rider, if you've ever gotten a ticket for being a bike rider. We get those in New York. If you've ever gotten a ticket for driving, you would be an illegal driver. If you haven't paid your taxes, you would be an illegal taxpayer. You're a taxpayer who committed a crime, a bike driver who committed a crime, a driver who committed a crime. An immigrant who really didn't commit a crime, because crossing the border without papers was always a misdemeanor. It's become criminalized now. Eyes wide open, private prisons, Black Lives Matter, very powerful. Black Lives Matter means that you guys are engaging with the system and saying you can't do this. And the prison system is saying, well, who are we going to put behind bars now? We have 10, 11, 12 undocumented immigrants, illegal immigrants. Perfect. Boom. Ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. You understand the connections now? You understand why we have to protect each other now, right? So this is where we all come in. The call to action is for you to be deeply engaged in these conversations at every level, and to understand that democracy looks like this, and that this is nothing to be afraid of. This is the power. And you guys, I'll just end on a joke, because I'm going to make you laugh, so we can't be crying. So I'm going to make you laugh, because also we have to find joy, right? We have got to find joy. That is our resistance. That is also our resistance, our joy, our beauty. I had this whole conversation like, what am I wearing today? Am I going very conservative, or am I going a little more funky? And I was like, the LGBTQ team called me out, I'm going more funky. So you can see my necklace here, it says chingona. If you don't know what chingona is, I'll come explain it to you. Very proud to be wearing this. But I am 5 things that this president doesn't like. I am Mexican. I'm an immigrant. I'm a journalist. I'm a woman. And I'm flat-chested. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Whoa. 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 Thank you. Oh my God. I was so nervous, you guys, because it's Johns Hopkins, I was like, ah! Thank you. I think we have time for a few questions as I pour water all over the stage. So, and there's a microphone. So if you have a question, jump up and down, I guess. The microphone is in the back. See it? So if you have a question. I can't see because of the blinding light. There we go, right up here.
Thank you so much. That was incredible, very inspiring speech.
Thank you.
You reminded me of a book I read, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, in the context of what it means to really dive deep, be enlightened by just basic humanity. You have a daughter that's in school going to Brown, and you're pole dancing, and you're connecting in a very diverse way. So your media company. So what does it mean to you? How do you think we can collectively create that sense of humanity and create the kind of change, given what we're seeing now in our current administration and moving in a more optimistic trajectory? Thank you.
I mean, I try to answer this question all the time, and I mean, I think, one, we don't have to create the wheel so that people shouldn't feel like, oh my God, if I don't create an organization on my own, then it's not worth it. There are so many organizations that have been doing this work for a long time. So just being there and being present in community. You know, some people are doing extraordinary acts. I'm doing a story, so don't break this, but I'm doing a story about a woman in New York who, when she heard that children were being flown into LaGuardia after being separated from their parents, which they were, she said, I live 10 minutes from the airport, I'm gonna go and be a witness. And from there, ended up meeting other people and connecting, and now she's created her own organization where she is helping, because they are here in your community. Women and children who have been transported from the border here, who are, especially here, so we're in Maryland, right? Yes. Bing. So like Maryland, hello. I mean, it's right here. Like you guys are like in the heart of Central American dynamics. So being present, whether it's in churches, whether it's, I mean, the level of need, whether it's legal need or whether it's actually somebody, you know, donating a coat to the church because the family doesn't, and being able to see. And open your eyes. It is, you know, I live in the heart of Harlem, and I was walking on the street and I was like, oh my God, that's a child who's been taken from his mother. I know that he is with a foster parent because I can see it's a Central American child and it's a Dominican abuelita. Wow, what? So at least just seeing it, like, okay, wow, so the next time maybe I say hello to the child. Hola, buenos días, ¿cómo estás? You know, so, you know, donating, those of you who have money. I mean, I have a nonprofit media company. We depend on people like you. Literally, when each one of you says, I'm going to donate $1 a month to Futuro Media, it's like, yes! So in my case, independent media, supporting independent media. Trying to create community. People are doing this in multiple ways. If you're an artist creating, I mean, that is the other thing, is that, you know, the artists are saving us in so many ways. And, you know, maybe it's meditating in community. So I just feel like and by the way, I feel like you know, I wake up many mornings and I'm in a state of terror because I have spoken to the babies and children who were in those cages. And you don't even want to have those thoughts in your mind because they wake you up at 4 in the morning and you're, oh my God, and you feel like this because it's happening right now, right now. And so I know that when the history books are written, the way they're written about what they call the Japanese internment, Japanese internment, excuse me. It was American citizens imprisoned. They're not Japanese. And what is an internment anyway? So even the terminology, I don't use the term slave. It is a person born into slavery, an enslaved person. Every act that we try is to bring back a bit of humanity. And some of it is as simple as changing a word in our vocabulary. And some of it is, I don't know, somebody who I know who's actually like a high-powered media executive just paid her way and another volunteers, and they went to spend a week on the border serving food to the refugees who are sleeping in tents on concrete. And this one woman is a Broadway performer. So she's singing Broadway in Matamoros, Mexico, in the middle of a makeshift camp that I can't believe it's Mexico. It's tents on concrete. And she's like, the hills are alive. And I'm like, I'm watching the movie It's a Beautiful Life right here. So you all have to answer, what were you doing when children were being held in cages? Each one of us has to ask that. Because your kids and grandkids may be asking you that. It's a question I grew up asking. What were all those people doing during the Holocaust? During the Holocaust, they were having brunch. They were going to college. They were shopping. So it's on us to open our eyes. I love your question, and your outfit's fabulous. You're welcome.
Thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much,
Yes, ma'am.
Maria, for your voice, your presence, your courage and bravery that's really exuded this morning. I wonder if you can speak more to how you begin to dispel some of those myths and stigmas that you were seeking to further your own agenda, and how you stayed true to not compromising your personal integrity.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been the story of my life. By the way, off the record, don't put it out there. Do not tweet about it. I'm writing a memoir. I just finished. So it's going to be out in a year. I know it's really, whoo. But we need to make it a bestseller, so please buy 5 copies. Please, please, please buy 5 copies when it comes out and give it to all your friends. I'm begging you. Actually, no, seriously, I am, because Latina writers, we have to prove that we have a market. And so I am being watched with all due love and respect. So it is the story of my life, this. And it is what I'm trying to get, like, my students and my staff, because I have a nonprofit newsroom. I'm the only Latina that runs a nonprofit newsroom in the United States right now, and it's incredibly diverse, and we do it, and it's not that complicated, and diversity includes white men. So that is what we do, and we do this by encouraging voice, right? So it is not a top-down institution, and I created that on purpose. We spend a lot of time in our corporate culture thinking about how we create a sense of community, which then empowers our staffers to own their voice. So I feel like part of my job, especially with the younger generation, is to have them understand the power that they do have. That when I was younger, I was a radical on campus at Barnard, so I was a radical. And so I guess I didn't have a problem owning my voice, even though I was, always battling the imposter syndrome. But I would just say that we have to own that experience and that voice that we have in places where maybe we don't feel like we belong. But there's this thing that I learned actually from my mentor and best friend in the whole wide world, Sandy Rattley, who was the first African-American vice president at NPR. And is my colleague, and we work together, a generation older than me. And Sandy always told me, put honey on your tongue. Put honey on your tongue when you're having these conversations, so that we can try to approach them not with, but with a bit of. So it's managing both things. Like I said, being that full egoed person that is like, oh no, but I'm about to tell you what I think. And at the same time being able to say, but let me hear what you have to say. And I just want, at this particular moment in American history, we do have to work extra hard to believe that we have voice. Because we are being, it's true. I mean, people of color, women of color are being insulted by this president and his staff on a daily. And so we have to build ourselves up and believe that we have a right. And that's where rage can be righteous. But I do believe in boxing, though. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you so much for being here. I have to comment, President Daniels, one thing you left out from your presentation was that 50 years ago this season, Johns Hopkins admitted their first women, and I was one of those women, so thank you.
Nice.
So, of course, being here is very sentimental. And out of the blue, I heard from my best friend from school, who I talk to every few months, and she says, "Hey, what are you doing today?" And I said, "Oh my God, you're not going to believe it. I'm up at campus." But we call ourselves the pioneers. We were not brought together for a picture. The women of Hopkins were left to figure out their own path until about 10 years ago, when one of my classmates pulled us all together, and we went, "Oh my gosh." We all went through so much to become who we are today, and it all, much of it, not all, but much of it started here. As a pioneer, you too are a pioneer, and I'd like you to talk a little bit, just changing the conversation a bit, about how you and other women and women, you as a Mexican woman, how have you changed journalism in your experience over the time since you've been engaged?
How have I changed it, or
how have women in
women in journalism
changed the face of journalism, not the face, but the nature of journalism as we see it today?
Look, I think this is an active conversation. This is a very active and dynamic conversation. And in fact, I write about this because I think part of what we have to do, look, the business of journalism is one of the most resistant to change, and it is one of the most least diverse. And I understand this. So part of what happens with women in journalism is oftentimes we feel like we have to become a part of the gang, the boys, in order to succeed. And my whole thing is, that's why I left, because I didn't want to have to play by somebody else's rules. I wanted to create my own rules. And now with my own nonprofit, I compete with everybody at the same level. By the way, our numbers are great on Latino USA. I mean, 26 years and our numbers are now like, okay. So women in journalism, particularly right now, I think we're at, yet again, another one of these moments where I think some of us were very pleased at what we saw in the debate in terms of the conversation about women and reproductive rights, but there was probably a whole other conversation around women in America that could have been had. And so kind of like, why wasn't, like, how much control did she have over the questions that she's asking versus how much is she being asked? This is just one example. I'm just saying that women have changed the dynamic of journalism in the United States, but we have to take it up another notch. And I'm going to give you an example why. And when I say we have to take it up another notch, it basically means men have to concede to leaving their positions of power, basically. Now, why? If you think about what was happening with Me Too, okay? So to put it very starkly, just because I know I have to wrap up. So, for example, before Matt Lauer was exposed, Matt Lauer was reporting about issues of Me Too. Before he was exposed, his senior editors who knew about were reporting about. So now think about the lens through which they are reporting about Me Too. So now imagine what would have happened. And by the way, all due respect, there were women who I know, colleagues, who also turned a blind eye. And that's what I'm talking about. Because the power imperative to succeed in media is such that I know that he's a terrible person, but he does really good for our fundraising, or he brings in great numbers, and that's what I'm trying to say, that women in journalism today have to have a more elevated consciousness about what our role and responsibility is. And again, I always turn back to Ida B. Wells in terms of how she operated and how she moved in the world of journalism. And so I'm asking American women across the board, and it's not just white women. I'm not even gonna, There is a little situation going on with another Ivy League that thinks it's very, very smart right now. And the characters that are involved in the conversation are all people of color. You guys are like, what is she talking about? You'll do a little bit of research. And it involves media and activism and journalism in an Ivy League, and the people involved, all of them are people of color. And so they're managing situations of how do we do journalism like this? And what I'm saying is the way journalism has been done in the past has not been good enough and has not been representative enough. And as a result, has not been doing the best journalism possible. And that's why everybody was surprised when Donald Trump won. It was like, no, I was saying he could win in 2015. And I was laughed off Meet the Press. I was like, come on, that's not going to happen. I was like, yeah. So better journalism, more hyper-aware and conscious journalism is better for everybody, not just for one community, but for all of us. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to eat my turkey. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your conference. I appreciate this so much. Thank you so much. Much love. Thank you.
One more time for our keynote speaker. And President Daniels, thank you as well for your leadership and your partnership as well. Okay, this is the last we'll convene all together. So once again, thank you for attending the Diversity Leadership Conference. And so there's 2 workshops in the afternoon. Please enjoy, and don't forget to give us your feedback afterwards. Thank you.